Hi there everybody, my name is Ben Stapley and my desire is to help you create and capture moving and memorable moments. Today I want to give you 10 steps for video testimony interviews, in particular the pre-interview within a church setting. Now you might not work within the church world, but don't worry, these steps will still apply to you. Many churches use video testimonies in their services to tell powerful stories of redemption and restoration, stories of God at work. These types of personal and intimate stories work best between friends when the interviewer and interviewee know each other well. Having a friend conduct the interview allows for authenticity and vulnerability. But oftentimes a friend isn't experienced in the interviewing craft. We are going to explore a number of helpful steps to help train and prepare any unseasoned interviewer. The pre-interview is a chance to ask your questions before the day of the recording. This gives you a clearer sense of the story. The last thing you want is a vague notion of what the testimony is, only to find out the day of the shooting it is completely different. It also reveals any additional aspects of the story along with new narrative threads to pull at beforehand. In the end, the pre-interview verifies that the story you want is the story you'll get. Step 1. Start with story. What is the story you want to convey and capture? You need to know this before you move forward with any additional work, because story dictates everything. Now when I say you need to know the story, I'm talking about the big picture, not all the details, just the 30,000 view. You need to be able to express what you're trying to capture in 4 basic sentences. A solid structure for this is background, problem, solution, and resolution. If you're looking to grow in this skill, then here's your homework assignment. Condense the popular 2-hour film to 4 sentences. Then use those sentences to explain the film to a friend and see if they know what you're talking about. Step 2. Get alignment on story. Now that you think you know the story, get alignment. Alignment needs to happen between 3 parties to verify everyone's on the same page. The client, subject, and producer. Client, the one requesting the story, subject, the one telling the story, and producer, the one crafting the story. A simple email to the client and subject with a 4-sentence description will suffice. Once you have alignment across these 3 parties, you can move forward with the process. If you don't have alignment, you're just throwing darts in the dark. You're hoping to stumble upon a story that everyone is pleased with, which rarely happens without alignment. Step 3. Develop your questions. After you have story and alignment, you can start to develop your questions. This process involves a little bit of reverse engineering. You've identified where you want to go with the story. Now you need to identify how to get there. Questions. I usually write down the types of answers I'm looking for from a subject. Then I craft a question that will elicit that response. Side note, your questions should be short and open-ended. Keeping them short allows the subject to retain their train of thought. Asking open-ended questions avoids the dreaded one-word response. Step 4. Get feedback on questions. Now that you have a list of possible questions and desired answers, get feedback from your client. Get the client to sign off on the questions and the potential answers. This helps you keep alignment. You also might want to get feedback from another trusted storyteller, someone who could add a little polish to your questions before you ask them. As an advanced step, you might want to develop alternative versions of your questions. Sometimes a phrase or a sentence structure can hang up or freeze a subject. When this happens, you can just pull out your alternative version, which gets them back on track. An example might be, tell me your testimony. Your subject might not be familiar with the word testimony and have no idea what you mean. At this point, you can pull out your alternative and say, tell me how God has changed you. Step 5. Type out answers. This might be one of those obvious steps, but I feel inclined to include it because I've skipped it in the past and I've suffered the consequences. So when you are conducting your pre-interview, don't forget to type out your answers to your questions. I would also encourage you to type over the phone instead of in person. Typing out the answers to personal questions in person can be off-putting. The subject can feel like they're dictating a legal deposition. If they do, their answers become stiff. If you quietly type over the phone, they are unaware and become more natural. That is, unless you have one of those loud mechanical keyboards from the 1990s. Typing out the answers also allows you to hand off your work to another producer if need be. Step 6. Don't give out the answers. After you finish the pre-interview, the subject often asks for a copy of the questions. They will want to look over the questions to prep before the day of the shoot. Do not do this. Do not email out your questions to the subject. If you do, they will try to memorize their answers, and this will take all the spontaneity and authenticity out of their responses. Step 7. Discuss logistics. Another thing to do at the end of the pre-interview is discuss logistics, like wardrobe, shooting date, time, and location. Location is key to discuss because you want a place that visually tells the story and is emotionally safe for the subject. So, if it's a story about a financial guru blowing the whistle on misappropriation of funds, then shooting in front of the stock exchange would visually tell the story. But the subject might not feel comfortable conducting this sensitive interview outdoors on Wall Street. So you have to balance a location that visually tells the story and is emotionally safe. You can find this balance by discussing logistics. Step 8. Discuss B-roll. After you've discussed logistics and found a location that visually tells the story, you need to discuss B-roll footage. B-roll is supplementary footage inserted as a cutaway to help visually tell the story. Let's go back to our stockbroker as an example. If we interviewed him in front of the stock exchange, then we need to get B-roll of the iconic bronze bull statue. Also ask the subject for personal footage or photos that tells the story. The stockbroker may talk about a keen understanding of numbers from an early age. They may have glowing report cards from elementary school that you can capture as B-roll for this moment. So capture and collect as much B-roll that helps to tell the story. Step 9. State shareability. The testimony video will be shown in your services, but you will also want to share it online to reach as many people as possible. So you need to let your subject know that you're going to share their powerful story in service and online. Stating this upfront avoids the shock of the story living beyond Sunday. This is a vital step, so vital that some put it first. The thinking is that if the subject is unwilling to share their story beyond Sunday, then we should be unwilling to capture it. And I agree with this line of thought. Video testimonies involve a lot of resources and should be produced only if they have the fullest range of distribution. But I have found that if you start with this step, it can scare away potential stories. If you wait until after the pre-interview is finished, then you get buy-in. This is because you didn't have anything salacious in the pre-interview. You didn't use any gotcha questions or tabloid journalism. Instead, you demonstrated a sensitivity to the subject and a care for their story in the way you framed your questions. Step 10. Get alignment on answers. We got alignment with the client on the story and the questions. Now we need to get alignment with the client on the answers. Sharing your typed out answers allows the client one last check-in before you go and shoot. This check-in verifies that the story you're going to capture is the one in your client's mind. If there's a disconnect, you need to identify it before the day of the shoot, because after you hit record, your ability to craft the story becomes radically reduced. You can still shape the story when you edit, but at this point, it's going to be minimal. Getting alignment on answers also allows the client to highlight any particular phrase or answer that is key to capture for the story. So those are my 10 steps for nailing the pre-interview. Send an email to benstapley@gmail.com and let me know what steps I missed. I would love to hear from you and learn from you. I'd also love to connect on social media, so look me up. In the end, we want to tell powerful stories of redemption and restoration, stories of God at work. So hopefully these steps will give you a clearer sense of the story that God is calling you to tell.